Welcome to the OhSoSpurs podcast. A lot of stuff has actually happened. Could Rodrygo be on the way? Morgan Gibbs-White is finally a topic of the past. We can look to green pastures in the future. We can also learn a little bit about those friendlies, although we won't take much of your time up on those. In fact, we're going to add chapters to this podcast, so you can skip right past those if you don't want to hear about a 0-0 against Luton Town and how an academy player you may never see play for Spurs again did in a 5-minute cameo. I love our academy players. It sounds a bit harsh, guys, doesn't it? And we'll also be going over our members' questions from our Discord and WhatsApp group as well. And to help us all with that is the wonderful Stu over in sunny Dubai. How are you, Stu?
Very well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Doing well. You are just 30 shirts away from competing with Johnny, who I'm going to pass over to next in drizzly Dublin. How are you, Johnny?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Yes, good to be back. Good to see you. And hope everyone's well.
And in the land of milk and honey is our very own honey of the show. I don't know where I'm going with this. It's Deej.
Hello. Don't know where to go with that.
That was off the script, wasn't it? Didn't expect that one. Keep you guys on your toes.
You can put that in the chapter title.
Guys, let's just spend a few minutes on the friendlies. I think everyone's seen these dissected to the nth degree on various channels available to them. But we had 2 friendlies in a day, and there were some things to learn about the starting 11s more than anything else, I'd say. And one of those I wanted to start on, guys, was Bentancur's unavailable due to a injury. It was a stark reminder to me of how much we need a 6 and how important Bentancur is to a lineup, because when he's not there, you're suddenly looking at academy players to fill the void, right? Stu, did you watch the Wickham game in particular? Did you sit through that?
I did sit through it, although I'll be very honest, I had one eye on the game, one eye on the Lions match at the same time. And unfortunately, the Lions match was far more captivating and thrilling and had me on the edge of the seat than the 2-2 draw against Wickham. It wasn't the highest paced match. I don't think, as you said, we had a make-do team put out there. And I don't think we learned too much from it. Though it was interesting to see Sarr as a more advanced player in midfield, and good for him to get a brace. I've not really seen him in that position before. And I believe he played there for Metz more than he has done for us. So maybe that is something that Frank is looking at going forward, which could be something to keep an eye on.
And that Metz loan, by the way, people are always asking, is he going to be homegrown? No, he's not, because he had that Metz loan. Apparently that is the reason why he won't make the 3-year minimum time at Spurs.
Well, it's
to qualify for it.
Just that. It's that plus he's not an EU citizen. I think that was the thing that made it weird with him compared to like Saliba, who did the same thing.
Got it. Okay, there you go. Learned something new. We all did, hopefully. Deej, you've already done one show on these friendlies, so I'm going to torture you with a bit more. Sarr looked good in that 10 role, though, didn't he? Do you reckon we need Morgan Gibbs-Sarr? We don't need Morgan Gibbs-White. We should keep him.
I think Sarr will look good in any position you put him in because he will make sure he is within 3 yards of the ball at all times, basically. So it doesn't really matter which position you play him. He's going to play in a similar role in that he's going to be the most annoying player you've ever played against if you have the ball and he doesn't. And he's going to be very, very dynamic in the attack. But I don't think that his passing range is picked out to be 10 necessarily. I think that of all of the players who moonlit as a 10 in the Wickham game, I think that the best one, I don't know, maybe the most inspiring. I don't know if inspiring is the right word for anything that came out of the Wickham game, but the most inspiring one was definitely when Odegaard came centrally. I think he was the one player that I think showed that he had the ball control, like the ability to keep the ball close to the feet and also pick out a pass, maybe take a pot shot from the edge of the 18, which led to our first goal that Sarr finished because Sarr is always going to be within 3 yards of the ball. So yeah, I think of any of the players that played today, the only one I'd want to see play 10 again is any of the senior players I'd want to see play 10 again is Odegaard.
I think Sarr's one that you don't expect him to suddenly turn into some kind of game-changing superstar one season. He's been steadily improving for me over his time at Spurs, and let's hope that continues into this season, where every year he just gets that bit better. And all the managers have loved him for a reason, right? He's a smart player with grounded head on his shoulders, and he's always fought and battled his way to have a purpose into the squad, even when certain managers have tried to push him to one side. But Johnny, there were other players who did some good things. One of our two dribbly wingers, Wilson Odobert, looked pretty good. Pedro Porro's hair, better or worse? I'll leave that up to you to decide, Johnny. What do you make of those two?
Yeah, I thought the right-hand side was definitely looking was threatening. And I thought Bergvall was sort of loitering on that side of the pitch quite a bit as well. So the three of them with Hotspur up top, they really linked up well, I thought. Then you had the word cameo, it seems to be the word for this pod. But the young fella Thompson, who's 17-year-old from the academy, was in my extended highlights reel that I've educated my way. I was travelling, so I couldn't watch the game live. But yeah, Thompson, 17-year-old, he looked really, really good and very progressive and very ambitious going forward. And like you guys said, I mean, I think it's fair what Gigi's saying about Sarr, but like he is he's very reactive. He does anticipate well, does get to ball quickly, and from our midfielders from last season, there's the infamous disallowed goal against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, of course, which was like a bit of a worldie, but Sarr's got that in his locker. There's been a few games last season when he's come up and scored some really nice finishes. I think that he gets a hard deal from some section of the Spurs, which is not merited. Again, he's still very young. So there was as much as it was a 2-2 draw against Wickham and a Spartan setting of Hotspur away. It was, of the two games, by far the more interesting, it would seem, from the highlights. That is all I've seen of it. I mean, there was so little to talk about really from the Luton game. So I'm just the other thing was Brandon Austin letting a howler was just maybe a bit unfair to be bringing it up, but I just did.
All right, Johnny, leave it out. He's a Spurs fan, been at the club. He's probably one of our longest serving players, isn't he? Must have been here at least.
It's interesting because it's another topic, isn't it? Sort of doing the rounds is the goalkeeper situation.
But for Austin, I'm still clinging to the hope that the Spurs commentary were right and there was a deflection that kind of...
Okay.
I didn't see it, but the camera angle was awful. But in the commentary, they wrote that it did get a deflection. So I'm hoping for Austin that there was, because otherwise...
Yeah. No, it was pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little bit bad. But there's no point, I think, diving too much into moments like that in a friendly. As Frank said, a lot of this was just minutes and legs. They were friendlies before the main friendlies, and then the main friendlies lead into the Super Cup. So I'm not too concerned about that.
Can I just ask you guys if you also thought it was strange that Austin got to play the whole game, whereas Kinski and Vicario had to share, and Gunter went to that game to sit on the bench? Whereas I would have thought, I don't know if you guys agree, but it would have made more sense for him to have played 45 minutes of the Wickham game.
Definitely.
Yeah, there was a few things like that. But I guess, to be fair to Frank, when you imagine having to plan for 2 games in a day, and then he's probably more thinking about the pre-season games when he lands in Hong Kong. So I don't know. There's so much that you could unpack from those games that might be energy wasted on us overanalyzing as we do as fans and watching a game from a terrible camera angle. We also played Luton. We had 2 shots at goals. There were 2 big chances. Does anyone want to dive into anything else from that game? Do you want to?
No.
Fast forward. God, dude, you've got a few minutes to say.
The only thing I care about is that we brought an academy player off the bench whose name is Reece Alexander Russell Denny, and that is the first time I've ever seen someone with a double hyphenated name, and that was the most interesting thing that I saw on this.
Reece Alexander Russell Denny. He's
It's amazing.
That's pretty cool.
That's a cool name.
Is there a word for someone with a double hyphenated name?
Double.
Like uber posh.
Double. Because there's a word for someone whose name is spelt the same front ways and back ways, like Ekatike.
Palindrome, yeah.
Yeah, palindrome. Palindrome, did you say?
Palindrome,
palindrome.
Palindrome.
Yeah.
Not the cycle track, a palindrome. Palindrome.
That's a velodrome.
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 Oh, mate.
I'm not into
Okay.
cycling. Not into cycling, as you might
As
have
you can
guessed.
see, we'd rather talk
Our
about
first
anything than
0-0
the
in
Luton.
871 days, apparently.
The only thing that I wanted to say about the Luton game, because I was struggling not to fall asleep, was Lancashire, again, for me, showed he's the most dangerous striker that has been playing in pre-season. He scored a goal last week, almost came close to scoring out of all the strikers who played these two games, which is kind of promising for him and perhaps a little bit scary for the senior players.
Yeah, well, I think in an ideal world, we'll make some additions this summer so that he can get the comfortable loan he needs to get and those minutes to show his level. I think he's got potential, and we need to give him a platform to grow and succeed. He reminds me of, if anyone ever watched the series Skins, character Cook in there. Don't know if anyone else has that. I think he's actually, I don't know what the actor's name is, but if you have seen that, maybe you also think so. Let us know in the comments. Do you want to talk about anything else in that game? Are you ready for the big stuff?
The one thing,
You
which
keep
is,
reeling me back into these friendlies in Luton.
it's a worrying thing is Udogie being injured, because he was a last minute change,
Yes.
which meant Donnelly having to play out of position. And I felt really sorry for
Yeah.
Donnelly, because it would, these games are chances for him to show what he can do in the middle of the pitch, and he's having to play out of position.
That's true.
But it is a bit worrying that, again, after two quite serious injuries in the last 2 years, that Udogie is again got an injury and not being able to go on tour.
We need that wing back. We've needed one for 2
100%.
years.
100%.
Needed it 2 years. Need to get it now. Come on, Spurs.
Kudus is worth mentioning, I think, for the Luton game as well. I from what I could see again in the highlights, he looked like he was bringing a proper threat, and it was, again, we're seeing what he provided in the Reading game in terms of that running at players and beating the opposition. So it's just for me, when I saw that, I was thinking, well, it's reinforcing what we kind of were hoping we would see throughout in the future this season.
Well, shortly after these friendlies, a couple of things happened. Spurs got on a plane and they left Morgan Gibbs-White behind, smiling and holding hands with the Forest chairman, Marinakis. There's a lot of conspiracy theories going around on this one. We'll just touch on it, but because it's the past now, we're going to look forward to the future. It was a funny one, wasn't it, guys? It seems like in the end, the reports are saying we never actually met the release clause in its entirety, which explains a lot. We met the fee total number, but release clauses include numerous clauses within them. It has to be installments of certain amount paid by a certain time, with other, exact valuations involved with those points you have to meet. And it was more of us trying to have a discussion around how we get there, and Forrest saying, we're not telling you any answers, back off, he's our player. But it's quite telling, isn't it, guys, that he only signed a 1-year extension with Forest. A 3-year contract these days is very short. Most players are signing 5+ years with their clubs in the Premier League. At Chelsea, you're getting close to double digits. But do you see it as a player we'd go back for in a year? Johnny, do you think we'd go back for him in a year's time, or do you think that ship's just sailed now?
Well, I mean, I suppose there's a couple of things. First of all, you'd imagine price tag is going to be a lot higher than what we thought we were going to get him for this time round. Whether we're in that position to be paying that, obviously you don't know what's going to happen in terms of our own squad and how things develop in Tottenham in the year ahead. And I guess the other thing is, well, essentially, when we saw that this deal was apparently concluded, although we were really delighted to have a player of that quality, he wasn't addressing the primary need, was it? So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's going to see how that role develops. And, obviously the money hasn't been spent, but I think there are other priorities that are more important anyway. So I don't know. It's difficult to see. I don't know. Will he have as good a season for Forest this season? How are Forest going to manage? They've obviously lost Elanga as well. It's going to be really interesting. But I think from the player's point of view, we can only speculate about the conversations behind the scenes. But I guess from his point of view, he's got a very nice pay rise, by one would imagine, and he's probably more than likely to go somewhere next year. And Forest have kind of won the PR battle, or the chairman and his egotistical skills and manipulation, whatever you want to call it. Like he's made a statement, and I guess if you're a Forest fan, you got to be happy with that, because you don't want to be bullied around. I'm not saying that Tottenham did do that, but it's like the days when we had to sell all our best players whenever somebody came knocking. You know, I might not be happy about it, and I might not be impressed with how Forest have dealt with it, but I don't really know the whole story. They are an interesting club. The whole Palace thing as well in Europe.
To be fair to them, it is really hard to break the ceiling and kind of push your way up the Premier League beyond a certain point, and they're doing it. If their chairman's finding ways to help them do that off the pitch, can you really blame them? If it was Levy, and we said it before, Atletico Madrid find out about his release clause, they're going to get him for a price we think is too low. Levy rocks up and says, "Now I'm wheeling in the lawyers. I found a way to block this and convince them to extend by an extra year." We'd be, pretty happy with that. We wouldn't be going, "I'm disgraced at the behaviour of my chairman." I think it's more a reaction of, I'm gutted because I feel we're a bigger club than Forest. We can attract these players. And it's a weird feeling when they stop us doing that because it's making our lives more difficult. And we had the here we go. We had all the euphoria. But you mentioned something earlier, Johnny, was about that's not necessarily a priority position. It would be an excellent addition to the team that would improve us. But Deej, you're scrunching your face at me. I can think of 3 positions we need over that.
I disagree, honestly. I think that a 6 is the only position that we need more than a 10, especially because if it's like the same thing, if we were running into this season with Richarlison at number 9, Richarlison is a very talented forward. And I think like if he was healthy for a full season, I would be happy with him as my starting number 9. But nobody's going to go into a season thinking that Richarlison, we don't also need another 9 if we only had Richarlison, because Richarlison can't stay healthy. And Maddison, I think, is the same thing. He's kind of proven that. Maddison has not had a full season of Premier League play in, I think, at least 3 years. And we just have to accept that that's kind of who he is. He's going to be brilliant on his day, but he's not going to be able to play every week. And especially with the hectic schedule that playing in 4 competitions has, we need to have a backup, and we do not have a backup, especially with Kulusevski out until whenever he is out until. And even if he comes back, we don't know if he's going to be a competent, like the kind of 10 that we want in the system, or if we want him to play as a winger or wherever we want to play him. So I think that, and like we've seen last season, we saw season before that, every season, I think that a big part of what our ups and downs is whether or not we have a lock picker. And that's Maddison. And Maddison's our only lock picker. Now you can argue that maybe Kudus becomes that, and then we can kind of put someone who's more like direct at the 10 role, or we can, but I just think that having a 10 is just, that can play when Maddison doesn't, is just so necessary for the squad over, I think, any of the other positions that we might be looking at.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Go on, Stu.
No, it's because I fully agree with Deej. I think our midfield is our weakest area all last season. I've been very clear that I didn't think Kulu was the 10 that we were looking for last year. And I don't think, I've seen anything that'll change my mind that he will be this year. And all the comments Deej said about Maddison is spot on. You're the one who said, Jim, when we signed him, that your Leicester friend was the one who said, he's 1/3 injured, 1/3 on form, 1/3 out of form. So you need to have someone to back that role up. And we're going to be playing, as Deej said, in the Champions League, which is a lot more competitive, where you can't get away with someone who's not really in their natural position because the competition is just so much harder. So I think Morgan Gibbs-White would have been absolutely perfect. It is what it is. We just need to find another alternative. The only thing I will say, last thing I will say, but the video was, I don't blame the club at all. I think the only way we were going to get him was if he kicked up and forced it, because he was the one who had the contract who could then force it out, and he clearly has been the one who changed his mind. And I also don't believe the rumors going around that we didn't trigger the release clause, because the whole legal fuss that they kicked off about was because we met the release clause. I think people are just making up stuff to have a go at the club.
Yeah.
Well, it actually has come out as some official articles now to say.
It came out through. Yeah. It was basically Marinakis himself wrote it and sent it to.
It was
to
a PR.
We don't know what actually happened. Like if you read that article, it was like had specific like paragraphs basically praising Marinakis at least 3 separate times in that article, between the one line of, and they actually didn't trigger the release clause. It was like, glorious Marinakis is leading Nottingham Forest to the promised land, and he is such a great owner. And also, they didn't trigger the release clause. But then why was there the...
And how would the
the
journalists know if they
begin
did or
with?
they didn't?
No,
Yeah.
I'm just
It's
saying.
not, they're not allowed to know. There's an NDA.
There's typically a halfway house of these things and where reality lies. And I think if Spurs had cleanly met the release clause, not broken any confidentiality agreements, had done it all squeaky clean by the books, there wouldn't have been much of a chance for Forest to block. There were technicalities that they leveraged to slow the deal down, which added complexity to the situation because they were built on something. I don't think we just simply went and met it completely cleanly. There was the conversations about us not being able to know about that release clause, which I believe is probably true, even though all clubs do it. And they were within their right to kind of ask for a review on how we found out, even though they're never going to prove it. And within that time, they've managed to convince a player to sign.
Yeah, but if we knew about the release clause, how would we have not met the specifications of the release clause?
Exactly.
No, exactly. We knew about it, but we weren't allowed to know about it.
Yeah, but
So that's breaching
yeah.
the confidentiality clause,
But then
isn't
the
it?
line in the article doesn't make sense that we didn't
The
trigger
line
the
in the
release
Oh, I
clause.
see what you mean. Okay,
says that
yeah.
we didn't actually meet the release clause, which means we wouldn't have known about the release clause.
Right.
It doesn't.
That
It
makes
doesn't add
sense.
up.
So there's something somewhere.
One of those
that
two
meant it
things
was-
is true,
Yeah.
but they can't be both.
That's true. But should we move on from the past? And look, Johnny's nodding.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm ready to move
Let's
on.
look to another player that's not getting on the plane, who is one of the futures of Tottenham. Before we
Maybe.
get to the Brazilian one, that's now had
Okay.
2 reporters come out today. Mikey Moore, he's going to be wearing blue next season in a Rangers shirt, by the sounds of it. Johnny, do you think this is the right move for Mikey Moore to get him out on loan? I know a lot of people wanted to see him hang around next season, but do you think that's the right decision by the club?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent move for the player, and in turn for the club, because I would assume that he's going to be an important player to Rangers and he's going to play a lot of football. And it's whatever you say about the SPL, and most of which is probably valid in terms of its overall quality and depth, there are still 2 huge clubs there. It's not as if Rangers were only a couple of points behind Celtic. Like, Celtic absolutely walked the title and they won it. Like, it might have even been March. It was like they were so far in front last year. So Rangers have got a big job to do to catch up. And they lost plenty of games last year, not just against Celtic. So there is going to be competition there for him. He's going to learn a lot. It's like any player who's going to go down the leagues in England, like your Jamie Donnelly's last year at Orient. There's going to be aspects of the game that you can only learn in that sort of competitive setting. And obviously for him, as well as like just being, I think the capacity at Ibrox is something around 45,000, maybe towards 50,000, and it's a fervent atmosphere. He's gonna be exposed, I suppose, and he'll be much more prominent in terms of his sort of notoriety within the city, a city that is very defined along those sort of lines of Rangers and Celtic. And so he's going to be under a good bit of scrutiny, which is no harm either, because, he's going to have that if he's a Premier League player at a top Premier League club. And, they will be competing in cups. He probably will play in cup finals. And he's got European football, hopefully Champions League football the Scottish sides have done pretty well in the last few years in Europe, particularly Rangers, actually. So I think it's an excellent move for him, and I think as a result, it's an excellent move for Spurs, because he should develop quite a lot. And given his age, there's not many 17-year-olds getting that kind of level of experience. And I think I'd imagine if he plays as well as we would expect him to, he's going to be a fan favourite, which will be good for his confidence.
Well, he already is a fan favourite for Spurs, and he's only made those small amount of games. Now, I'm not sure it's going to be exactly the same for Rangers, because he's not a Rangers Academy boy and he's not, a Scottish local lad. I don't even know if he's born in Tottenham, but yeah, you know what I mean. There's not that same affiliation. There'll be less forgiveness, perhaps, when you're chasing titles, you're chasing trophies, which is healthy for his growth, right? Men's football, expectations and pressures of being at a huge club like Rangers. Let's see how he gets on. But we've said it before, he could go on 4 loans and come back at 21 years old. So he's still got so much time to find his level and kick on. But Deej, when we started, you put your phone up and you said there's another journalist saying we're after a different left winger. I think you could argue it would be a slight upgrade on Mikey Moore right now in Rodrygo from Real Madrid. I was last night adamant talking to you that there's no way he would leave Real Madrid to come to Spurs right now. Maybe it would be a loan, but you kind of reassured me through the situation on their left-hand side at the moment that, and Stu, you talked about it as well, there's not many clubs who could offer him a starting place on the wing and give him European football. Do you think this one's actually got legs, Deej? Do you think this one's real?
Necessarily that they can't offer him. It's that they have players that that are already embedded in their system, that they don't believe that Rodrygo is enough of an upgrade over to think he's worth the amount of money they would need to spend for him. I think is probably the way we need to look at this, because I think he is a really, really good left winger. He's caught a lot of flack at Madrid because he is, unfortunately, I think the third best left winger at that club. But when the other two are Mbappe and Vinicius Jr., that's not really saying all that much, other than he's not like a top 2 left winger in world football. Maybe 3 or 4. I don't know. I don't have like the list off the top of my head of who I think is the best, but he's definitely there's being worse than Vinicius and Mbappe is nothing to scoff at, and not saying doesn't mean that
if we were ambitious, we'd go for Vinicius, wouldn't we?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Why not both?
Isn't that a problem?
Actually, just buy out Real Madrid as a club. But no, I think that I think it's definitely an interesting move. I think that this would be I think we would be able to say that this is where the Morgan Gibbs-White money is going. I think it is interesting that we've had both a Brazilian journalist, which was the one that I saw, and an English journalist talk about Tottenham beginning conversations with intermediaries. So obviously nothing has gone along, but I think that having the same thing, 2 journalists that are almost absurdly disconnected saying the same thing, means that there's probably some fire from that smoke. Whether or not that means we get him, I don't know, but it definitely seems like we're trying.
Well, Stu, you had some feelings on him as well. You follow other European leagues a bit more closely than the average Premier League fan, and you also agree with Deej that there's not like clear alternatives to Spurs. Maybe we're doing ourselves disjustice by always making it out like, oh, well, thank goodness no one else wants him. That means we've got a shot. We are a big club. We have won the Europa League, and we can afford a player like this. Could you see a world in which Spurs do go and go, here you go, Real Madrid, 80 million quid. Here you go, Rodrygo, 250 grand a week. You're our main player on the left wing?
I mean, we are a big club, but I think we also have to be realistic that if Chelsea or Liverpool wanted him, he'd choose them over us. But as Deej said, fortunately the other top 4 sides have got someone else in the squad, and he wants guaranteed playing time, and he wants to play on the left wing. He's sick of playing on the right wing, and I think with the World Cup coming up, it's also playing into our hands that he's going to be looking to go somewhere to shine. The only thing I do fear is that maybe he would only come to us on a loan and then hope that after a good World Cup, another bigger club might be in for him. It also depends on how much money. You said 80 million. I saw other reports of 90, which is, it's almost 50% more than we've ever spent on a player in our history. So I would love us to do it, but I just don't know if we're ready to spend 90 million and 250, 300,000 a week. So I think if he were to come, perhaps loan with an option.
Well, Stu, I have to cut across you because it's just broken that Rodrygo has no interest in joining Tottenham Hotspur, and that dream is firmly dead.
There you go.
So, what do? Talk about Mikey Moore again? I don't know. Well, no, we've got...
Talk about the other players we're trying to get rid of, who stayed behind.
Yeah, Paulinho, Deej, I know you really like him. No, I'm only joking. The thing is, that's, I guess, makes me more frustrated at the moment is, I know, and this is one of the questions we had on Discord, is Matt Law's thesis that we have very little wiggle room of cash flow to use. We have more cash still than most clubs. That article, when you read it, was less about cash flow. It was about Spurs having a squad that was full of non-homegrown players and needing to be one in and one out. What he did very cleverly, as journalists are very good at this, is made an article that insinuated Spurs were completely out of money and that it was one in, one out for those reasons. And then you have to click on that article and pay for that newspaper to find out the true reasons. Now, Spurs do owe a lot in transfer payables for fees owed this season, but they still have a £50 million HSBC facility they can draw down on any time to top up their cash. And typically, players amortise over 5 years anyway. So there's plenty of ways Spurs can navigate this and be aggressive in this window. You rarely play massive fees up front for them. So, and I guess knowing that makes it a little bit more frustrating when we're slower out the blocks to kind of address more of these issues, guys. But would you prefer we take this approach and we just start aiming at our dream? Well, we don't even know what's true. It's the thing with Langer. Aside from Gibbs-White and Kudus, we couldn't tell you who Spurs have gone for. We may have never even remotely considered Rodrygo, but we definitely need a left wing back and a left centre back. That was one of the questions today. If we go into the season with a left centre back as Ben Davies at backup, are we giving Frank a tough ask for maintaining a European spot this season, or is that just not something we should worry about? Is Ben Davies fine?
I think that we need to shift the thinking from is Ben Davies fine to what he thinks of Vuskovic and Takai. I don't know if either of those will be players that we want to keep, or if we want to send out on loan. I think I'd be pretty much fine with either. But I think that based on the amount that they've played with, that Vuskovic in particular has played with the senior team, it kind of looks like at least he's being given an opportunity to show that he can hack it with us. Do I think that'll, if we do end up moving them both on loan, and if Frank determines that we need that they aren't yet at the level that we need, then I would hope we would bring in another left-sided center back, because we know the injury history of Van de Ven. But I do think that there are probably other areas that we are more important, as mentioned before, with like the 10 and the left wing if Son goes, and obviously the number 6 that we needed for like 3 seasons now.
And it does look like, on that topic though of Sonny, that he is going to join the MLS. Close to Deej, only a few hours drive for you, Deej, so you'll be getting to chapter 3 of Son Heung-min. But Johnny, you kind of comfortable with that, or do you think, given that we've struggled to find other senior players to add, maybe there's no harm in keeping Son around for one more season?
I wish you hadn't asked me the Son question, because that was the.
You don't have to pick a side. You can love Son and be happy if he stays and understand if he goes.
Well, I was kind of.
It's not like get out my football club.
Oh no, I know, but when I kind of did say that last week, and the response from certain quarters was quite unforgiving, and obviously people who hadn't seen what I'd said about Son before, when I was very, very adamant that he should stay this sort of time last year. So no, I think for his sake, I think he deserves to go wherever he wants to go. If there's an offer on the table, and it's great the way his season ended last year. And I think really, other than that, I mean, what disappoints me most from the transfer side of things is, like you're saying, Jim, there, in terms of just like the business that the other clubs are doing. I suppose after we won the Europa League and qualified for the Champions League, I know there's obviously a bit of sort of time. I mean, the transfer window didn't open, but like there was obviously the whole business with Thomas Frank coming in and stuff. But like you sort of feel that maybe it's a naive thing, but the fact that you can offer Champions League football would maybe be a bit more of a lure than perhaps it actually is, because maybe people don't see Spurs as sort of competing at that level beyond this season, and maybe we just locked out, which isn't entirely untrue, I guess. But I mean, we still earned that place, and we are still historically in the last decade a regular Champions League side who've usually got to the elimination stages. So I mean, I just think there's, in terms of the speculation and the conversations about transfers, the way that the business has been done has been a very hush-hush, and then suddenly things are out and they're almost finished. If we're able to have conversations about what we perceive to be the biggest priorities, and there's pretty much a consensus, and the vast majority of Spurs fans would go along with that, then there's no way that the dudes who are making the decisions don't see that. I mean, come on, who do we think we are? So I think that's the one thing I'm going to hold on to, and sort of stay away from social media as far as I possibly can, unless things are really starting to pick up momentum, because there's just so much. I mean, that's what sells papers, that's what gets clicks, isn't it? And this Rodrygo thing, perhaps that's all that was ever about. And I still feel that from what we did see that sort of amazing day when Kudus and Website appeared to be joining, that things are obviously happening all the time in the background, and we just sort of hope that's...
If I put this video title as capital letters, Rodrygo back on, he wants Spurs, I will get a notification when I upload the video from YouTube, which says this video is getting more views than usual from audiences outside your traditional viewers. And that's what happens when you upload these videos.
Yeah.
If I go but then what I'll get is a message from regular listeners to say, why have you turned into that? What are you doing? And I'm being disingenuous with who we want to engage with on a daily basis, the people who listen to this regularly that we've carefully tried to keep content consistent with.
Yeah.
And you can see why, like if you're in a journalism situation where you're hyper competitive, loads of people around you, you've got to play. They've got to play the game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it looks like, judging by the latest things, we got played by the game and got really excited, and it works, right? I believed for a day that we might get Rodrygo. Now I feel like that's.
I have a update to that. I did some research, and apparently the guy who said that is less reliable than looking.
Yeah, that's
at
So you're saying he's back?
Crystal ball.
He's back on.
He's
So
back,
the new
baby.
title of this video: Rodrygo back on.
I looked up.
Right?
I looked up. Is that name reliable? And the first thing that came up is very reliable source says that Nico Williams has signed a deal with till 2031. So,
yeah. And I watched him play for Athletic Bilbao against PSV at the weekend.
So we have to go back into Rodrygo to get debate again. But just on that, I do want to finish on the Rodrygo bit to say I'm personally of the same view of Stu. I think it's an attainable transfer if the player feels a bit like we had to almost structure with Tell at first in the way to convince him to join that. There's a pathway back to his parent club that's not unrealistic and gives them reassurance that if they join Spurs, the season's a disaster, we come 15th, they're not going to be messing around with us fighting for the League Cup as our main hope of a trophy that season. They can go back to Real Madrid, or there's a release clause somewhere that says Man City could get me out of here for 120 million quid, something like that. But there's also a world in which a player like him joins us, like Tell did, and goes, actually, they're a bit bigger than I thought, and maybe this is a good place for me to be. Yes, please, I'll have some more of that Tottenham thing. Thank you very much. So,
and don't forget the pull of Richarlison.
of course,
I think it sums up how big we are, though, that Richarlison we seem as like a problem in our squad. When a lot of clubs would say, like, wow, the Brazilian number 9. If he was going to a lot of the clubs my mates support in the Premier League, they'd be going, this is class. Like, I remember when Sunderland signed Defoe, and they're a huge club off us.
Yeah.
It wasn't even off us, was it? He was like 35. They were buzzing. It's like the biggest signing in X years. And, we're quite lucky we have so many brilliant players at Spurs that we're in this team.
I'm going to risk something here and just mention a name that we weren't supposed to ever mention again, perhaps. When you mention Tell, and you talk about why he joined, I mean, it's very much in the recent folklore that Levy went over and couldn't get over the line, and then Big Ange stepped in and did what Big Ange does when he spoke to the likes of Vicario and a number of players who were just enamored by his persuasive skills from the beginning. And I have heard, again, there's no way of knowing, and I certainly wouldn't want to be disrespectful to Thomas Frank, because I think the fan base is pretty united behind Thomas Frank and is happy with his appointment. Certainly, I would include myself in that. But it is interesting to speculate in a very hypothetical sort of reality that is never going to exist. But I think it's still relevant. When we were talking earlier about the Gibbs-White thing, if Ange were present, is there any sort of realm of possibility that that skill that he seems to have had, Stu shaking his head, that might made a 1%, 2%?
It would have made no difference
more
considering who the owner of Forest is.
Well, I think that's a fair point. But to go back to the broader point, I think it's something that he definitely did bring, and I don't know if we have that at the moment. And that's don't mean to be disparaging towards Thomas Frank, but we haven't had. At least there hasn't been the reports, and we for 2 years were sat and listened to him, and you could see what the players said about him, and you understood what he represented, and you could see how persuasive he could be, and he did get the silverware. So I'm just wondering, what is this somewhere where Thomas Frank isn't as much of a lure? I don't know.
Can I refute that as what Kudus said when he joined us? With one of the reasons he joined us was having seen how Thomas Frank improved players.
Yeah, I think it depends on the
Fair
player.
enough.
I think it really does. Like that, we don't know how much of the Ange phone call stuff was, again, like a media outlet being like, Spurs fans love this when I have to write about this,
Yeah.
versus reality. And I'm sure, like all things in life, the truth lies somewhere in between, where Ange, we know his strength is man motivating. We know he's got that aura about him that a lot of players warm to. But I think what's more important to players is, do they believe that that football club is going to be able to grow them and bring them what they want with their own ambitions? And that goes far beyond the manager. It goes beyond the whole culture of the club, the size of the club.
That's true, but I think the manager is a massive part, and
Yeah.
Postecoglou did have a big impact on the culture, given the turnaround that was needed. And I think obviously Thomas Frank, as he said himself, is recognised that that's something he's benefiting from now. And to go back to your point there, Stu, which I do think is a fair point in terms of what Kudus has said, and that makes perfect sense. But Kudus has been in the Premier League for the last 2 seasons, so he'd be very much more familiar with Thomas Frank than players. If you're bringing in players from the continent, I don't think Thomas Frank would be registered. Again, I'm not having a pop at Thomas Frank. I'm literally just speculating here and hypothesizing. I don't know if players outside of the Premier League would realise what most people would be aware of in terms of his ability to develop players, particularly younger players.
I would say, first of all, players talk, and there's so many different nationalities within each team that there's a fair chance that someone will know someone. Secondly, the Levy thing, no one knows if he wasn't able to get over the line and Ange got it over. That was just a rumor. I mean, why would Levy be there trying to do a deal if the player hadn't already said he was willing to come? Thirdly, Ange himself said that everybody only knows about the ones he convinced. They don't know about the ones he wasn't able to convince. And Due was one of them.
That's good.
Moani was another one. So there's a long list. And then the last point I'll make is, are you saying that, and no disrespect to Ange, but it's not that he had this amazing reputation that would be able to convince a Rodrygo to join us either, that a Thomas Frank who demonstrated in the Premier League of him being able to develop players?
Let's be careful not to go down this thing of like,
No, I love Ange. It's not putting down Ange.
No, I don't mean it like that. I mean, like, we're probably, we defended the guy for the whole of his last campaign. We need to be careful not to go down the road of like looking back to say, kind of that slight bit of like, yeah, see, if we'd kind of kept the guy, this would have been different, or vice versa. We just don't know. You can't compare the two scenarios because we don't. It could be exactly the same. It could be completely different. It could be worse. It could be better. We really don't know.
I think also the type of player that got convinced by Ange is not the kind of player that we're currently.
Yeah,
that's true.
Going for, because it's like Dragoshin, who is like an up and coming talent who was either going to go and get bit part minutes or have a significant part in our squad or at least that was the plan, because of the injuries to both of our center backs. You have Tell, who is going to go to another up and coming player who's going to either go to apparently us or one of the more dysfunctional teams in Europe at that moment, which was Manchester United. Like, fair play to him. I think it is definitely something that he did very well, was like obviously the Ange call or whatever. But I think if we had rattled off, if Morgan Gibbs-White had come without this legal weirdness and we got one more transfer, and I think we'd probably start saying the same thing about Frank too, especially with the way that the transfers, like was mentioned earlier, I think with the way that Langa does transfers, we don't really have a lot of misses, if that makes sense now. Like our transfers aren't as public. So it looks like we just have hits, which obviously is probably not the case. So if, like, with this Gibbs-White one with a very public miss, obviously I think this is one of the, besides Kolumwani, I think one of the last, like one of the first misses of a Tottenham player that we've been like seriously linked with by like a tier one source in a while. So I think that Langa's like modus operandi for transfers and like not letting things leak may also have contributed to the mythos of like the Ange call.
But I'd also say that to back up what Jim was saying, that yes, Ange probably did convince Tell to come and join us in January, but he decided and agreed to stay after we fired Ange. Where that's where I think, as Jim said, it is the club that plays a role and the ambition that we as a club present to the player.
Let's quickly wrap up some of the questions from our members as well, guys. One of them was, should Levy and Langer work on their omnipotence skills so they can match the 2020 hindsight of the fan base?
Yes.
They
should just like pretend that they're a week in the future, and then they get everything exactly right, and then do everything based on what they now know. They need to hire Doc Brown. Go back to the future.
The idea of there's also some comments about we've had it recently because we had actually a brilliant guest on once who explained like how fans could buy their football club and run it. The idea of our own fan base running Spurs scares me a bit. We can't even decide on Brennan Johnson. Can you imagine us like how? Can you imagine how long a transfer would drag on with arguments?
The fan base
and
would
votes
only
and
be
vetoes
trying
to
to
those
sign
votes and
gift
Mbappe. And like we would, as soon as we didn't sign like the best player in every position, we would just
we'd have signed whichever flavor of the month.
Can you imagine like should Spurs
us
take out a £500 million loan
up front?
Exactly. But also, have you guys noticed that now that things have kind of gone wrong, that nobody's talking about Vinay anymore? It's all Levy's fault.
Yeah, it's flipped. It went from every message on social media that was good, like the flags, the scarves, the PR stuff was well done Vinay, well done Vinay. Then as soon as the Thomas Partey stuff comes out, it's like, what's Levy done hiring someone who's associated to that mess? And you're like, okay, well, here we go. And then it kind of goes quiet for a bit, and now it's back on to, you're right, it's this club has no idea how to manage these circumstances. And that's a good one for the next question. How can we best navigate silly season without becoming silly ourselves?
Chill.
Turn off social media.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's probably the case. Like realistically, it's a thing where we've kind of been programmed into it. And I honestly think that this Morgan Gibbs-White thing wouldn't have hurt as much if we had the old scattergun approach that Paratici had, where we had like 8 different rumors flying at the same time. And that kind of feeds the fan base the red meat that they need to like get excited over something. Because obviously as fans, all we want to do is feel excited. And we're just like, we're waiting. Like, I feel like we got so excited about Gibbs-White, and now that Gibbs-White has fallen through in one of the weirder transfer things of all time, I don't think you can blame anyone at Tottenham for. We're kind of like, okay, now, what now? What now? Come on, give me a rumor. Come on, give me something. What now? And I think that's probably why we're latching onto this Rodrygo thing as hard as we are. I'm not sure that'll happen. But it's...
So unless you're hearing
it's just
a
the
rumor,
next name.
there's nothing happening.
Yeah.
It's just it's either that. Well, but there are things happening we just don't know about.
Of course,
and then we'll be fine when we sign another player. But it is annoying as a fan, I think, to not have any idea what's going on. But I think that based on the last transfer window and all of our like transfer dealings, with the exception of Tell, like Tell was the big outlier in this whole like Langa works in silence thing. But I think we've made enough transfers without much of a fuss that I think you can be confident that we are working on things. So we're also working on outgoings.
The idea that we all, like a big herd of penguins, just all run off in the same direction and do one thing at a time with like 100 people at once is ridiculous. There's no way Spurs are like, right, Gibbs-White thing's happening now. If you are not involved with this deal, you're not allowed, like, you have to either work on this or stop what you're doing. I don't want anyone else working on anything else. I don't want anyone talking about loans. I don't want anyone accepting calls about Basuma's sale.
Yeah,
exactly.
Everyone out of offices on until Terry has finished the Morgan Gibbs-White stuff over there with Johan, all right?
I hope
It's just
Terry.
ridiculous. Pardon?
said I hope he fired Terry if he was in charge of the Morgan Gibbs-White stuff.
Useless Terry.
Poor Terry.
Yeah,
Poor
come on,
Terry.
Terry.
Guys, I kind of will wrap up with Deej. You made some good points as you were helping build the running order up this pod. You summarised it with everything's going to be all right. We should be a good team next season. You said we will be a good team next season. We are all but certainly going to sign more players. That is going to happen. It just hasn't happened as quickly as people would like. More important is the intent to go and get a Gibbs-White deal done and use that money now with equal intent on someone else.
If after the end of the Kane saga had been Kane and Levy on the pitch and Kane just saying how great Levy is for a minute and a half and signing a 1-year contract.
Yeah.
That is so true.
I don't think the fan base would have reacted to that the same way that Nottingham Forest set up.
I would like to see how we would react to it.
It would be weird
I think a lot of people would like it.
They would, but I don't know. I
think we'd treat it differently. I think we'd say, this is pathetic, you're treating a club legend like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
whatever he does, I'm sorry, there's certain people, and I'm not a Levy lover, but like, people have long since made up their minds, haven't they?
Indeed. Well, up the Spurs, guys.
Go on, you Spurs.
Hang on.